Today we have a special guest, David Cowling. He's the master at what they call process maps. He speaks for on stages all over the United States. He helps businesses, all types. Like David, what are some of the businesses that you help? Like different types.
Well, we've got some media companies, a lot of different types of real estate, property management. We had a frozen yogurt company a few months ago. It was a little different, some printing. So yeah, nice wide range. Keeps it exciting.
And so like when you bring in a company or when you meet with a company, like what's the number one thing that you think that they struggle with?
Clearly defining what they actually expect to their employees.
Okay. And so like we're going to help that today. And we have Nancy on here and she's going to help us or she's going to be the guinea pig.
Nancy Kowalik. But let
So
me
cool.
just say, hey, David, welcome. Haven't seen you in a while. Um,
Yeah.
and David, just so you guys know, David, we hired Sharper Business Solutions about, I think it's almost maybe 3 years ago, I believe. And what they did for our business is they came in and really helped us structure more of our business, really got things on track as far as our org chart, meetings, who's, quarterly goals, yearly goals. And David, we've been working with every single week for the last year. Now, I haven't seen David, as you guys just heard me say, hey, David, I haven't seen you in a while. And because I'm not on those calls, okay? Who's on those calls? And I just kind of want to give you just a little bit of an outline. Who's on those calls is our team. So, what happens, for example, on our team is a Lynn, like I may or Mark or somebody else gives a Lynn a process that we need to create or that we need to fix, or they know of a process that needs to be fixed. So every week we spend my team, whoever it is that does the actual process, spends 1 hour a week either creating it or going over it or whatever that looks like. And process maps out the situation. So we have, I don't even know, David, how many processes do we have in our,
Uh, Dozens,
okay.
Like
So,
we
and
safely.
have we have one just for this webinar. Like we
You
have
have
a
three.
process three.
oh, we have three.
If
Okay.
for this webinar, you have three.
Yeah. So
So he knows the step by step of exactly what we need to do. And so I just kind of want to give you a little bit of background about that. And the biggest issue that we find and that we talk to David about is actually once you create the process or update the process and you're spending 1 hour a week, your business should run really well once you've got them all, once you have them all built out. And especially because you're working on it an hour a week. And now we have somebody who's coming into our business, sees it in a different light. And he knows our business, obviously, over the last 3 years and have helped us do all of this really, really well. But what he said is the biggest issue is once you have them in place, making sure that everybody actually uses them. Right, David?
Yeah, it's a lot of wasted time if you don't use them. It's very
And
frustrating.
that's a big problem because when we usually see something break down, we'll go back to the process and guess what it is? It's usually there and it's usually the people actually not utilizing that process. So we have Nancy Kowalik here, who is freaking amazing, and she has a very big real estate business. So I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away, David.
Sweet. All right. First, thanks for inviting me on. I'm excited. We got our meeting scheduled Friday, so that'll be good too. To start off with, I'm going to give everyone, I'll keep it quick, but just an intro to what process mapping is. Because if you haven't done it, it's a little bit different. Fortunately, it's pretty simple, and it really needs to be simple, or else no one's ever going to use this. I see that happen quite a bit. People try and make these so detailed, so in depth. They try and learn all the different shapes, and all they've done is they've guaranteed that no employee is ever going to use that map because it just looks visually confusing. All right, I'm seeing some nods, so maybe that's happened to a few of you. I love seeing several that look like literal tornadoes. Like, how'd you expect anybody to actually understand that? It's not going to work. So we'll keep it nice and simple. I'll share my screen and pull this up. and we're going to end up using the same software. I use Lucidchart. It's not the only software that works, but obviously I'm the best in the world at this, and that's what I use. So that's what I recommend. Um, but we're going to start. You really only need 5 shapes. Okay, and they're very simple, they're very intuitive. Okay, first you have what's called the Terminator. That's the one that looks like a pill. If you really have a good Arnold impression, feel free to use that whenever Terminators come up. There's no action that takes place inside Terminators. This just lets you know and let your teammates know where does the process start and where does the process end. Okay, that's what Terminators are for. All right, we'll also link processes together. We'll talk about that down the road. Shape number 2, rectangle. That's the process box. This is where all the action should happen. Now, let me specify, when we talk about process maps, process is what you do, procedure is how you do it, right? Or the SOPs, policies when you do it. So when we're doing process maps, if you see boxes get really big, you're probably including too much detail, right? And you're going into SOPs. So don't do that to yourself or to your teammates because they're not going to use that either. Okay, so we document what you do. So it might be update your software or update the contact. It's not enter contact first name, enter contact last name, enter contact phone number, enter contact address, because you all got really annoyed with me for spelling out that much detail verbally, right? Don't do that to yourself visually either. That's the process box. Shape 3 is the diamond, and these are probably my favorite. These are fun ones. Okay, diamonds are for decisions. Anywhere the process could split. You have multiple options. Or if you're training somebody, a good phrase to look out for, if you hear yourself say, well, if this happens, then, that means there's a diamond in your process and there's a decision that needs to be made. What we do is we ask a very clear yes or no question. Whatever's more efficient is going to continue to the right on your process map. Whatever's less efficient goes a different direction. Okay, so we can focus on efficiency with these processes. But that's what diamonds are for. We'll get more into those later and talk about how to define those and blow them up. This shape here, it's technically a parallelogram, but you can call it whatever you'd like to. This is for automation. It's the same as a process box, except no one has to do it manually. Okay, so if you have some sort of automation set up where calendar reminders, whatever, web forms, all that good stuff, is becoming more and more popular and becoming a lot easier. You still need to capture that, but let's show it inside of automation. I'll go to the last one here. It's a predefined or sub-process. All right, box with double bars on it. This shows that we've either already documented that process or we're planning to document that one soon. The reason you use this shape is to keep each map focused. All right, so for example, if let's say this was some sort of lead management follow-up process, instead of saying, hey, did they answer no? All right, we'll call them back. Did they answer? No. Leave a voicemail. Send them a text. Did they respond within 2 hours? No. Send them an email. Did they respond within 8 hours? No. Call them back. And going on, which is going to sidetrack us from the main point of this process. We'll show, hey, we've entered the hot follow-up process. We're going to document that separately, and we're only going to document it once, not 8,000 times every time it comes up, because no one's going to follow that either. All right, so we can keep these very clean and simple. I'll show you 2 more things real quickly, and then we're going to get to the fun part and actually start. These need to look very legible and look easy. And that's embarrassing, but it's probably the most important part of process mapping, right? They have to be able to visually see this and say, yeah, I can do that. All right, we want to take what they're doing and make it simple. So make sure, again, I obviously have the best formatting in the entire world, so you should probably copy mine, but keep them linear, keep them straight, right? Make them easy to follow. Last thing here, and this is a pro tip. Most people miss this. Use what's called the pool, so you can split the process by swim lanes. Okay, so what is a swim lane? It's these things over here. Or you can see on the left, I have a roll 1, a roll 2. Every process map, when you split it by swim lanes, if you think like the Olympic pools, they have those big plastic dividers so everyone knows where they're supposed to go. We identify what role is responsible for that swim lane. So by the time you finish with the process map, you should know what needs to be done. You should know what role is responsible for doing it. And while we're talking about roles, please, right, I'm almost begging you, don't put your name inside the process map, right? Kristin, Mark, Ann, Aylin, Kate, I shouldn't have started because I'll have to name everybody, right? We don't put their names inside the process maps because we're not going to find another one of them, right? We can find, right? And we can scale based on another salesperson, right? Based on another operations manager. So identify the roles, even if it's the same person in the entire process. If you are sitting in 3 seats and you're wearing multiple hats, identify each one so you can make these processes scalable. All right.
Like you brought up yesterday that I don't know how you phrased it, but like what most people do is they are the process,
Yeah,
the actual person. Like there is no process map, it's just them themselves. And they just figure the way through it. And this is actually helping us where we can actually hire people and do it.
Yeah, because you never, I mean, if you think about it, you never, ever, ever want exactly what he said. You never want to put the process to a person ever because you got people coming and going. You got people changing positions. So you never want to rely on a person to create a process.
yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's only so many individuals out there. You can
Well, and
only
then,
go as big as that one person if
you
you
know, and
tie
then
it to that.
the other big thing is what you've really taught us is how you pull all of your KPIs out of your process. Like your
Yeah.
KPIs come from the processes that you're making, and that's how you're creating all of that.
Yeah, I can give a quick demo on that if you'd
I'd
like.
love for you
Sure.
to really go through a process so these guys can understand with Nancy, and then how you're pulling a KPI out of it. If this doesn't happen, how and really going through that so these guys can wrap their heads around how
Yeah,
this works.
absolutely. All right, so let's do the whole thing then. So real quick, we're going to zoom out one step, right? So right now we're looking at how does this process work? What happens? We're going to zoom out so you can identify what processes you need to document. Because what a lot of people do, something breaks, right? They don't like some result they got inside the business. They zoom in really close and they say, well, this should never have happened. And they take 3 hours documenting, right? The thing that happened once in the last 10 years. And they, well, this is why this shouldn't have happened. And that doesn't work very well. It's very disjointed. It's out of context. Nobody really understands what you're doing. So we need to give proper context and show exactly how these things fit together. So I just call it an overview, right? I'll give you a couple. We'll do maybe a simpler example to start. Here, we'll do something like this. This is just your customer journey, right? How do you get your customers? Usually it's some form of marketing, right? And then what is their path with you from the perspective of one customer, right? One lead. It might be, and these are all just templates, but marketing, then they're going to go through your sales process once the lead comes in, right? If they sign up, maybe we need to onboard them, right? Once they get onboarded, now they're in our standard operations where they're just going to continue and stay with us from there. Okay, it should look very simple, right? Now, some of them get a little more in depth. If you've ever done property management, there's a lot of processes that happen and there's a lot of different loops that are possible. Okay, but this is a framework that you can build off of. Each one of these boxes has its own process. So we can start to piece together. Okay, so here's your part of the leasing process. That's what you own. You don't need to know how to do marketing. You don't need to know all these ins and outs of every different thing at once. Let's start here, right? So we can build it in a very structured way. Now, the other thing, right? We talk KPIs, and now here's the fun part. Your key performance indicators, right, should come at the end of each of your core process maps. Okay, because what that number tells you is it tells you, did your process perform today? Did your process win or did your process lose? Right? And if we make it to the end, that's a win. Right? Now, performance indicators are like a wins and losses column, right? If you're into sports, thankfully, at least me and Mark are. But if you're into sports, you know wins and losses, they matter over the course of the season. Are you on track to hit your ultimate goal, which is to win the championship? Okay, but they don't tell you quite everything. So we're also going to cover key process indicators, which is one step smaller. Those happen within the processes, right? We're going to look at diamonds for those. That's one of the reasons they're my favorite, right? And we got the little diamond in our logo now. But process indicators tell you two things, right? They can tell you, one, are your employees following the process, right? And two, if they are following the process and the process indicators still point low, that tells you where your process is broken, right? My guess is if we took a poll, and we probably don't have time to do a full poll right now, but most of you would say I spend a lot of time trying to find problems to solve, right? Because you know the problems are there and you waste tons of time saying, well, where is it? Who's the culprit? What's the thing that's holding us back? Right? If you
Whose
could
throat can I
know,
choke? Whose throat can I
yes,
choke?
there you go. Exactly. And if you knew exactly where in your process you started to lose that effectiveness and lose that efficiency, it would save you a lot of time, right? And I'm assuming, I think my time's valuable. Yours might be more valuable than mine. So your time's probably pretty valuable. All right, so this is how we can really dial in and make these things scalable because you don't have to spend so much time solving a single problem. You can start to solve the most important problems as soon as they happen, and not 3 months later when they finally show up on your bottom line. All right, we'll get into more specifics as we actually build, but I think we're ready for the fun part. So we got blank slate here. Nancy, what are we doing today?
So we're going to map the process of dealing with open house prospects.
All right, let's do it. What lets us know to get started?
So a lead comes into the database. So they've registered through our app into our database. They've come to an
There
open
we
house and
go.
they've registered. Mhm.
You're gonna have to forgive my typing, everybody. It's notoriously horrible. These are my unofficial favorite shapes, the sticky note. All right, so an open house lead comes in, it's coming in through the app. What do we do with it first?
So the first thing that happens is the lead, the listing agent in the open house verifies that they've received that lead. So they're looking at it on their app live in real time, and they're making a connection with that person that's come in, and they're perhaps making some notes on it. So that's the first step.
Gotcha. So they're going to confirm that the lead has been received. And is this with that lead or is this in your internal system?
This is in our internal system. We have someone out front registering people, so this is an ongoing process.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. So once they've received that lead, then so I'll just take you all through one process with one lead, right? So they've received the lead after the open house. If they've not booked an appointment with that lead. So first step is, did they book a subsequent appointment from that open house?
Got it. All right. Let's say yes. We'll think happy thoughts first.
Right. So if they've booked a lead, they have, so I don't know if this is process or mapping, so they have to go into the system and identify and take them out of a stage and put them in that they're now an active client, right?
Gotcha. Let's just do something like this.
Okay. So if they have, then they've set up an appointment to meet that client and take them out to see properties or to write an offer on that
Gotcha.
property,
Okay.
right?
So they've already done one of those two things at this point. Is that correct?
They've,
And we're
so
going to
they've
now
engaged,
fulfill?
that's correct. Yes. So if they've booked an
Okay.
appointment, we don't know if they've booked an appointment to write an offer or if they've booked an appointment to go see another property.
Gotcha. So either way, we're attending that appointment next, it sounds like.
Correct. Yes.
All right. Is there any other prep work we need to do for that appointment?
So the agent at that time will have to go through the buyer's agency presentation with the client.
Okay.
That right? Did the client keep the appointment? Correct. Was the
Yeah, that's always a fun one.
Yes. Was the presentation made? Is the client
Gotcha.
signed? Yep. So was the client signed?
Gotcha. Again, thinking happy thoughts first time through, so we point to our
Absolutely.
efficiency. All
Right.
right. So yes, they signed.
So if they signed, then it becomes whether they're writing an offer or they're taking them out to see a property. Kind of depend on the direction.
Gotcha. Okay. Is there anything we need to do inside our internal systems at this point before
At
we
this
head out?
point, no,
Okay.
not that I can think of. George is also, he's my recruiter trainer. He's on here with me. George, anything I'm missing?
No,
Okay.
we're good.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. So the client signs, and now we're going to go out and we're going to show the property, whatever
Actively
they
work
need.
with them. Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's probably where I would draw the first. That would be the end of that process. All right. That's going to get us to our performance indicator. So we'll keep going here in a second.
Yeah.
But let's take care of some of the less happy thoughts.
Right.
And I like to work backwards because it ends up making the mapping a little cleaner and easier in my opinion. And obviously, as we established, my opinion is obviously the best one here. So we'll go with that. Once we complete the presentation, if the
Right.
client does not sign, what are our options?
Right. So objection handling, right? So is there more work that needs to be done? Or so identify the objection and act upon that objection. Address it.
Gotcha. Okay, so something along those lines.
Correct.
All right, so if we can overcome the objection, then it sounds like
Right.
we'd be good to go. If
Right.
we're not able to right there, what are our options at that point?
That at that point, they're not working with that client actively. So at this point, it's going to come down to, it'll come back to the ISA department. So it'll get assigned back to me, which I'm basically the ISA department, not me
Okay,
personally. That's how it works in our system. The
sure.
process will come back to the ISA, who's then calling to follow up on that appointment.
Gotcha. Okay, so then we'll enter a follow-up process there.
Correct.
Right. Okay, so working our way back. The client does not keep the appointment. I'm sure that never happens, but just in case.
Right. So again, goes back to the lead ISA at that point. So the agent will, of
Gotcha.
course, reach out, but then the process will go back to the ISA.
Gotcha. I'll throw in kind of a placeholder here just so when you end up doing SOPs for it,
Mhm.
you have something to jump off of.
Right.
Maybe something like this.
Right.
And this also gives you the framework to be able to specify exactly what you're looking for here.
Okay.
So like what is getting in touch with the client? Are they supposed to call twice? Is it just send a text? Any of them can be
It
fine,
is,
but
no, it's both. It's double tap, so it's
Okay.
calling twice and sending a text. Correct.
beautiful. Okay. And then how long are they expected to wait? If the client says, I'm so sorry, I'm going to be 30 minutes late. Are we keeping it or is that a reschedule?
We're keeping it within reason, right? So it's going to depend on time of day and other obligations of
Got
the
it.
agent, right?
Got it. Okay. All right. So then either of our no's are going to head back. Actually, I'll do it separately just because it's probably a little bit different follow-up process. Imagine a reschedule is probably different than somebody who's already met with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have harder proofs. Then we ask them if we're doing a reschedule, we ask them to meet us in the office.
Got it. Got it. Okay. If the lead has not yet booked an appointment, what are we doing?
Right. So if we've not booked an appointment, the agent is required after the open house, and by 5 p.m. they're required to actually reach back out to the client just for open-ended follow-up.
Gotcha. And is this a call?
It's a call. Correct.
Gotcha. And it sounds like that's your standard. It's a double
It is.
tap call anytime of contact. Okay.
Correct.
All right. So if they answer, it's open-ended follow-up, you said?
That's correct.
Are we going to attempt to book an appointment or we're just
Yes.
feeling it out and okay.
Nope, they're going to attempt to book appointment. If they're making contact, they're attempting to book an appointment.
Right. And then if we can, then presumably it leads right back up to there and we're back on our main flow.
That's correct.
Okay, so if they answer and we cannot book an appointment, where does that take us?
So it's going to one of two things, and so this help is appreciated. So the agent's
Yeah.
going to either claim this lead and say, "Look, I want to work with them," or they're going to hand it back to the ISA and say, "I think they're either too early on in the process, and it's going to get kicked back for a nurture." Right. So then the agent may
Yeah.
say, "Look, we had a great connection, timing was off, vacation, any number of
Sure.
life circumstances." So, but they'll follow up and there'll be a process for that. Or, listen, I couldn't really get a read on these folks, not sure where they're at. So it's going to get kicked back to the ISA department.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So really we could get into the nitty-gritty, but essentially you're deciding short-term versus long-term follow-up.
That's correct.
Perfect. Okay.
David, what is this called? Lucent? What's this called again?
Lucid, I think you said.
Lucid chart.
Yeah, Lucid.
Yes.
Lucid. LUCID. That's right.
Yes, ma'am. You should, if anybody's trying to sign up, you can make a free account. They're going to make you keep your maps really small and limit shape size. I want to say it's like $8 a month for pretty much anything you could need, but if you're not making big ones, then the free one should work. All right, so let's just give us some room here. So
Also, guys, any questions, just put them in the chat and we can answer them.
There
And
was
this
one,
will be on YouTube.
Yeah.
We'll send the link so you guys can go back and watch.
yeah, there was one earlier. Can it be department versus individual role like accounting, sales, or AP sales? I guess.
Gotcha. I prefer role. Now, for different types of maps that'll distract if I get into too much detail about those now, sure. But I highly prefer role because it happens a lot that what ends up happening if you just do role, your high performers in that department end up doing everything. And also, if everyone owns the task, no one owns the task, and things get lost and things get missed. So even if it's Dispo manager, Dispo associate, right, or whatever, Dispo specialist, you can have all three roles. That's fine. But if at all possible, I would try to identify each role. I think that's going to give you a better end product for sure.
I've found that to be the case every time. If it's given to a department, there's a lot of this. So
Yeah. And let me tell you guys just a couple of different things. First of all, if you guys love this, we build it out with, our VAs are the ones that get on the calls and do this, and Mark gets on the calls if he's involved in a certain thing or whatever. And they're the ones who do it. But David actually, can either, and I'm not trying to sell David, I'm just trying to tell you how important this is for your business, right? And David has a very reasonable cost to do either come your business and just do this part for you, with you, exactly what he's doing right here. And I don't know, how many do you do in like a day or two, David? I don't even know what, like a lot, right?
Yes, I probably meet with yesterday and today, I think I've met with 15 companies.
But how many do you do? If you go to a company, I'm saying, and you just want to spend a day or two or whatever, mapping out all their business, you go and do it. And how many can you get done like in a day is what I'm
Sure.
trying to
If we're prepared, then we can probably do 5 an hour. Now there does need to be some preparation to be ready to go that fast. But yeah, that you can go very quickly.
So I'm just saying, and I feel it's very reasonable if and you can talk about that later, or they can, reach out to you later, but it's very reasonable if somebody comes and let's say he does, let's say 4 or 5 an hour, and you have him for 2 days or a day or whatever, that's a la carte, right? You can pay for that separate. So I'm just letting you know that is an option for you if you guys are like, wow, I really need this. We hire them for other things as well, but I'm just saying that is available for you. And it's not
accessible
trying to sell him. We're just letting you know.
Yeah, accessible is huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate it. We can definitely do some stuff. I'll throw a form later if anybody does want to do that. I'll put a form in the chat if you'd like.
And Christine is asking if you have any chance that you have anything like this that is blank that they can use. Is there any type of blank form that they can use if they wanted to do their own map?
Just drawing yourself.
Short answer, yes. I try to be very protective of templates, not because I want to gatekeep, but because a lot of times people, they see template and what they hear is this is exactly what I should do. And that's certainly not the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll put actually in the folder that I think we're planning on sharing with people. I've put everything that we've looked at so far. So the blank examples, some of the overview examples, and some of those type things.
Perfect. Thank you. Because you
that.
got to know, like, the square is this, the diamond is this, the circle is this. And then you got to know, and he'll help, and I don't want to interrupt him anymore, but he'll help you pick out your KPIs and he'll show you how to do that after he builds this out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so obviously I really like processes, so I'm going to try and hit a couple of these, and then I think we'll have time we can maybe push a little further into some of this documentation.
Well, and a lot of these guys want to poke their eyes out right now. Okay, because that's the last thing any of these guys want to do. They're they own their own companies and stuff, and the last thing they want to do is this stuff. Like, so,
right. I can't believe it. I thought everybody really liked processes.
I was going to say, it's funny. Before doing this process, I created these checklists on my folder. Yeah. But the problem with that is the folder has to be in somebody's hand, and then it becomes who's doing what? And so it's still, and I've had a lot of I had no change for 8 years. I got spoiled. And then all of a sudden I've had turnover after turnover after turnover. And it has become a challenge to make sure the right people are doing the right things. And it becomes, oh, I thought this one did that. I thought Wendy did this. I thought Vem Rose did, and it becomes, oh God. So this is, it's, for as much as the checklist helped at a certain point when I was spoiled, the reality is that rarely happens where you can just say, this is how it's going to be forever. And so this process is different, and it's
Right.
helpful.
And
Yeah.
that's so true, Nancy, because as soon as you put a person like and he, because we've been working with him for 3 years, he's really got us out of the mindset of, guys, this doesn't make sense. You've got to take Kristin or Mark or Aylin or Kate or Ann or Raphael or what, they got to be out. It's got to be, where we can put anybody in here.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'll hit KPIs and we'll pull some from this. And you probably, I would guess most of you here could intuit what the KPIs should be from this process without seeing the process map, right? Because you're used to doing this and you just know what the indicators are. And I think they'll line up pretty closely and you'll see where we pull those from.
But I think that we were building out our charts, our tracking charts, to really figure out all of our numbers. And I mean, that's a whole nother like a whole nother thing. But
yeah.
We had to go back to David to literally him ask us the right questions to pull some of those KPIs that we just really needed. And that was extremely helpful.
So let's go through this one then. So I told you, and I'm not sure if you're familiar or not, we talked 4 types of KPIs, and I'm going to focus on the bottom 2. So it goes, it's key, something, indicator, it's purpose, profit, performance, and then process, right? Purpose, what's the point of the company? Why are you in business? Let's put a measurable on that so you can know you're actually coming close to accomplishing that. Profit is how much profit do we need in order to accomplish that purpose, right? Those are usually longer term goals. Performance, here's the performance we need to achieve the profit that allows us to accomplish the purpose, right? So all these KPIs should be tied together. Process indicators, here's how many process indicators we need in order to hit the performance, which gives us the profit to accomplish the purpose. All right, so that's going to do a few things, and we'll get into specifics there, but also this is just a side note. If you can tie that correctly and your employees are excited by the purpose of the company, you can show them how what they do on a daily basis, right, accomplishes and helps the team accomplish their purpose, right? Which is huge because I think we'd all look at our employees and say they're very valuable. What you do matters, right? But how many of them see that and can really believe that and understand and know, okay, this is why what I do matters. So that's a little bit of a side note, but it's a benefit of doing things this way. Now, performance indicators should be tracked weekly. I'm sure you've heard all that stuff before. And because people typically take 3 points of pain before they do anything, usually you have bad performance 3 weeks, and that's when you decide, okay, let's fix it. What's going on? When you use process indicators, those are daily numbers, right? At least my opinion and Rye's opinion, they should be. So what that does is it brings the point of pain up way sooner, right? 3 days of bad process indicators, 3 days out of 5 in a week, right? Means we need to look at it and we need to fix it, right? So which means your whole cycle time is going to be saved, right? Because we've been able to identify and solve the problem much quicker. So now to actual KPIs. I told you already that terminators are performance indicators, right? That's what we're shooting for. So in this case, the one that would have led into this would have ended with how many open house lead received, right? That's exactly where this process starts. That's definitely a performance indicator. How many leads are we getting for open houses? That's a big deal, right? Goal here is clients signed, right? How many clients are we getting signed? Now, as we look at those two things, I try to run everything through 4 filters, and I don't always do it perfectly, but these are the 4 that I think usually come up. First, raw number, right? How many clients signed? That's a big deal, right? Second thing is timeline. How long did it take from the time we received a lead to the time a client signed, right? What's our cycle time for this process, right? Knowing your average and seeing if that changes over time is a big deal, right? Because you need to know if your business is a money machine, hopefully, right? You need to know how long before I put my first dollars in until they should bring me friends back later, right? How long is that going to take? How long is my money going to be tied up? So your cycle time was going to matter. Third is a percentage, right? And I'm cherry picking because I know these are going to work, but what percentage of my open house leads become contracts, right? What percentage become active clients, right? And fourth, and this one usually matters more for your marketing, but how much did it cost, right? To get from point A to point B. And especially when you have different marketing channels, How expensive was your direct mail lead versus your paper lead, right? Versus, organic SEO, right? How much did those cost and how much was their ROI down the line? All right. So raw number, the time between the two, a percentage or a ratio, and potentially cost are the four filters I try to go through. So that's performance indicators. Now, when we look at process indicators, right, we can see here how many of our leads booked an appointment, right? That's going to be a nice performance indicator. And when I give you these process indicators, let me throw this out there real quick. I'm not saying you should track every single diamond and every single option, because depending on what size you're at, a lot of them are not going to be worth tracking yet, right? At a big enough scale, they're all worth tracking. But where you're at, you might spend so much time gathering data that you don't get to spend any time doing anything with it. But as we look at these, what percentage of our leads get an appointment? And if possible, it'd be fantastic to know how many of them just do it straight through the app and we don't even have to engage with them yet, right? Because there's a lot of time if the answer to that is no, right? This is the inefficient version of the process. That doesn't mean we shouldn't call, of course, right? But that means we have at least, I'd say minimum, what would you say, Nancy? A minimum of 5 minutes is going to be spent if they don't book through the app.
Right. Yes.
All right, so we know every time we get a no, it's at least 5 minutes, right? And if it goes perfectly, right, after that no, then that's 5 minutes. If it doesn't go perfectly, then we're going to assign it to an ISA, and who knows how long they're going to be in that follow-up process, if they ever come back in at all. All right, so that's a key number. All right, next on this, did the client keep the appointment? All right, what's your percentage of appointments that are kept? Right, that's obviously a big deal, because when we go to track, and I don't know if you do this, I do this, you can be very optimistic in our tracking. It's like, well, if we get this many leads, this is how, because when we say, if I have this many leads, what we're thinking is if I get in front of this many leads. So we start to fudge the numbers a little bit in our favor, and then we get to the end of the quarter, and it's like, well, where'd all the extra go? And it's things like this, right? Clients who aren't keeping our appointments. If you have 20% of people don't show up, that's not good. That's a 20% hit on our already diminished number of people who booked appointments. So did our client keep the appointment, right? And then more advanced numbers, how many of our clients that don't keep the appointment end up rescheduling and still coming through, right? I know I'm throwing a lot out, but also this is just fun because I like this stuff. When you go through your follow-up process, it's pretty common. People, well, how often should I follow up, right? What should that process be? What's the cadence? What works? It's like, well, if you check your data, right, and if you're able to capture that data, you can see exactly when you should stop following up because you're not going to get any conversions, right? If you followed up 30 times with somebody, and I followed up with 1,000 people 30 times, it's like, well, when's the last follow-up that somebody actually converted on? And if no one ever converted after time 23, let's never follow up more than 23 times, right? Until we show that it's necessary again, right? Until the data
I
proves
always
otherwise.
like to say in follow-up, if we're not, because we have years. I mean, we make a lot of money off of a guy that we never sold him a place for 5 years. Okay. And now it's repetitive again and again and again. I always like to say you follow up until they tell you to stop following up.
Go away.
And that's really when I don't, but necessarily we can follow up through systems, right?
Exactly.
But we never stop following up until they say, go away. I don't want you to follow up with me anymore.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Those are the types of things that, and I'm sure, so Nancy, you've got ISA follow-up and you've got your agent follow-up.
Yes.
I'm going to ask a loaded question. Why do you have two different types of follow-up?
Because agents don't follow up if it's not immediate. They can only see, that they're only short term.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They only want the A buyers or whatever. And, it's the lowest hanging fruit on the tree and stuff. So if you are not having somebody else follow up besides the agents, you're losing a ton of money.
You're losing 80%
Absolutely.
of your money. Yeah.
Yeah. 8%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So when you start to see, and that's very common, it's not just agents, anybody in sales ever, the sales rep always values their own time very highly. And if it's not somebody they're going to convert almost immediately, they just don't do it. So if we give them an avenue for somebody else to follow up, but we can see through some of these metrics, how long is my sales process effective, right? So if I leave it in my sales follow-up for a week, maybe that works really well, right? If I leave it in their follow-up for a month, they lose interest. They stop actually following up and our conversions drop. So that's when, like Kristin just said, hand it off to somebody else, right? Build a different process, use some different system, right? A cadence, automation, something, right? So we can figure out how to recapture those leads. But don't let people waste time. Or now I'm going to get into a separate thing, but this is also important. Sorry. When you're looking at process indicators and somebody's low, right? They're not performing the way that you wish they were. They're not following the process the way that you wish they were. Most of the time, not all the time, right? Occasionally people just wake up and say, you know what, let's burn it to the ground. I don't like my job, right? But that's very rare. Most people don't wake up and say, I hope I really suck at my job, right? They want to be good. Most of the time, if people aren't following the process, right, it's either because they don't understand the process or because they don't think the process works. Sometimes they're wrong and the process does work and they just don't see it, right? And we need to explain it better and give them an opportunity to buy in. But sometimes they're right because they're the ones going through the pain every single, 50 times a day when they run through that process. That's actually really valuable. If you could take your employees and you could turn them into problem identifiers, not necessarily problem solvers, because a lot of times you don't like how they solve problems. You'd rather have it go through the approved method of solving problems, which is you, and that's okay for now. But if you could turn your employees into somebody who I can identify, hey, this stinks. I really hate this. I really don't ever want to do this again because it's a waste of my time. Most people will, if you're open and honest enough, most people would love to tell you that, right? Which would save you a lot of time having to go back through and dive in and just pry. Please tell them, where's this problem at? And you spend all these time looking at the data. If people aren't following the process, once it's been laid out, once they've been trained to it, there's a reason. Sometimes it's a good reason, sometimes it's bad reasons, but that's what's going to fix it. That's what's going to help you jump back into the business, right? Fix it and be able to step back out and make sure it's running smoothly.
And that's a good point, David, because the first thing we say when we see something not the way we want it to be is, hold on, guys. We'll go to Alan or whatever, or whoever's supposed to be in that position. And we'll say, I'll say, is there a process for it? Well, of course, Kristin, there's a process. Okay, I want you to go back and look at that process. I want you to go over it and see what is happening and where our holes are in this process. And they'll come back and they'll go, no, it's all there and it's right. We just didn't use it. So it's one or the other. So we're either fixing it, tweaking it, creating it, or making sure that they're using it. So one of those things have to happen every single time, guys, and hold the accountability there of the team. And also, if it's not right, make sure it's tweaked to be right for you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay.
So how many KPIs would you pick out of this, David? I mean, asking Nancy the questions, how many KPIs would you pick from this one process? And what's your thought process when you're picking those KPIs?
Sure. So based on, there's some slight variable based on the scale. If you're running this process thousands of times a day, I would grab just about every diamond that's in this process and make it into a couple KPIs, probably time, percentage, and maybe raw numbers, maybe 3. If you're running this process 20 times a day, you don't need all that in-depth information because you're not going to have a big enough sample size. All right, let's just say for sure, right? Guaranteed, I want to know how many clients signed. I want to know how long it took, and I know what percentage of leads become clients.
Yep.
Right? I would say the same thing for these top line. All right, so how many leads booked an appointment? How long did it take them to book an appointment? Right? I would personally really like to know all of those as well. And again, on the top line, how many leads kept the appointment? If they didn't keep the appointment, what's the likelihood they come back? Right, so this top line is going to be the most important ones. And then as you increase scale, that's when you start to look at these bottom ones and they become more important as well. So short version, I would probably say numbers that I would like to see, there's probably, I think 12, right? If we go, about 3 or 4 there, 3 or 4 there, 3 or 4 there, and then I probably would also steal this one. How many are recaptured along with that one? How many are recaptured there?
Do you guys have any questions with this? Because this is so important that you're building the process first. You've got all the different shapes and what they mean, and then how to build your KPIs from those shapes. Is this making sense to you guys? Because I know a lot of you want to, poke your eyes out right now. But when you're looking, sorry, go ahead.
No, something that this is, I'm obviously biased, right? I like this stuff. But one thing that
You
documenting
love
the
it.
process
You
should
taste
do.
it, drink it, eat it. You love this stuff.
I complex decisions, I use process maps in my head.
Mhm.
But what this does is it gives you the framework to be able to explain all those things that you really feel like you can't train. I can't tell you how many times a week I hear people say, well, that's just like, how do you answer that question? How do you know if it's yes or no? Intuition. Like, well, I mean, okay, like I get you have good intuition, but you can't train somebody. Well, just have intuition. It's like, well, no, what are the most important variables? What says yes or no? And you can start to train, and maybe you can't make it perfect, but you can make it 80% of the way good. And using this method, it's a helpful tool to be able to extract that necessary information, right? To be able to say, here's exactly what I mean when I say this, right? So you can put it out on paper. And if you don't like these, I'm sorry. It's painful at first, right? A way to get around that, if you have somebody who does like these, which you almost certainly will have somebody who enjoys this, have them process map their job. They're probably going to include way too much detail, right? Then you look at it, they just told you what they do. So you look at their process, anything that you don't like or have a question about, there you go. You found your problems. Why are you doing it that way? Maybe they have a good reason it needs to stay there, right? Because you haven't been in that seat for a while. Maybe they don't have a good reason. Well, stop doing that. There you go. Your process just got better, right? And you didn't have to spend very much time at all. So you can outsource the building of these processes for sure to your teammates, right? And then you come later. There's a reason Kristin hasn't been on these meetings unless there's a major issue in the last couple years.
Yeah. And guys, you can, and that's probably where I'd start, is thinking, okay, can you have your team build out each and every one of them? And he's right. I mean, that's a great perception of, because if you're seeing it built out wrong, you're like, oh, that's the reason why we have the breakdown, because this isn't even the process that should be followed. Right. But the thing is, especially if you guys are looking to try, I always look and say, Mark and I talk about it and we say, any business that we're opening it to potentially sell it. Okay. It can be a possible at one time if you ever want to sell your business ever. Right. So you always want to set up any business. Now, we're not looking to sell anything, but I'm just saying you want to set it up. And if you guys don't have these, you don't have a sellable business. Period. Because why do you think people are buying, besides your contacts and everything, people are buying your business for this? You guys agree?
Yeah.
So if you don't have this, which I find, from being a coach, I find most people do not have this. And then they wonder where all the problems a lot, happen, and why things aren't consistent, and why things are, why they're being pulled back into the business too much. Why do you think I'm not pulled back into the business too much? Because we have these.
The
Right?
other thing is like when we go over these, because we change them sometimes, like sometimes
Tweak
we'll
them,
come
Yeah.
tweak them,
tweak
yeah.
them
Update
and
them.
say, something may change. But like one of the things we noticed, hey, this was supposed to be sent out via an email. And like in the process map, somehow the process was getting skipped. And you can literally go, okay, well, who's responsible for that? Well, the person that was responsible with that took a different position and we never reassigned it.
Yeah.
So the whole point of these is like I can literally I promote somebody, move somebody, I can literally hire somebody off the street. They can come in and they can figure out what they have to do. They can know the steps.
And like Mark said earlier, whose throat to choke? He's serious. Like, who is the one that's responsible for this?
Yeah.
Right? Who is ultimately the one responsible for this? Because then he can go and say, why isn't this done right? And they say, oh, you know what, Mark, I didn't follow the process. Okay, makes sense. That's why it fell apart.
So to think that way is like if I said the sales department's responsible for it, well, if there's 10 people in the sales department, I only have 2 hands. And it's hard to choke somebody one-handed each. Whereas if there's one throat, I got 2 hands on the one throat. So that's kind of how I think about it.
So like, for example, Aylin is in charge of our sales department. Okay. Even though she doesn't do the day-to-day sales, we have other people like Anne. Okay. But the thing is Aylin's really good at making sure things get done and holes don't happen. Okay, because she's more detailed. So when you guys are thinking about this stuff, think about who is the person that's ultimately responsible. And they don't need to be the one that's actually doing the job. They just need to be making sure that the department's running well and it's being tracked and where the issues are, the holes are, and everything else. Make sense? Because when we had Anne, and Anne is good at a lot of things, but she's not as detailed. right? At that certain thing. So when and Ann's really good in the sales end. So you got to look at just your whole company and what that means. So, sometimes you are going to switch people up, and take people in different positions. And, when we built out our organization chart, which is where you need to start, guys, is building that out in one person in charge of each thing. So, if you have a CEO, COO, and then you have marketing department, operations department, sales department, finance department, human resource department, that's pretty much what everybody has. And then you might add a couple more depending on what your business is. Okay. Somebody needs to be in charge, like Mark's in charge of marketing. Now I help in the marketing department, and so does Raphael, and so does Ann, right? Because you can sit in 3 different roles, but you've got to look at what does that.
And the
first thing is
beginning,
build that out. That
Yeah,
needs to be built out.
in the beginning, your cheeks are in all the seats,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
No,
If
you may
you're
have an
one-man
accountant.
shop.
Yeah,
If
you may
you're
have an
one-man shop.
accountant, you may have whatever, and then you're slowly replacing those seats with people.
If I can
So,
add,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, David.
that's okay. If I can add 2 things there. As you're going through, I saw somebody, talk about the number of numbers you need to know. If it looks overwhelming, you don't need that much information yet, right? And there's ways to do it where especially today, automation is easier than it ever has been before. So these numbers can get pulled automatically, right, with your hands off. Probably don't have time to cover all that today. But also when you look at this, it's pretty easy to identify what you can delegate easily. What you can delegate without hurting the process. I'm not saying this is the case for you specifically, Nancy, but if we said you have to delegate part of this process, all right, what's the part that absolutely cannot get delegated, right? And I'll cheat and answer for you. It's probably this part, right? Attending the appointment, completing the presentation. That's the moneymaker. That's what has to happen.
And
Really,
that's a really good point there, David, because like Nancy has a couple of virtual assistants too, right? And she has George, and she has other leadership, in her company. But the thing that I always tell people is can you definitely leverage out, and who can you leverage it out to? And like George, is he really doing the things that are going to change the outcome of the company as well as you? Or can he delegate those repetitive tasks and go to a virtual assistant or what, so you really want, and we're always redesigning our companies to figure out who's in the best seats for what, including Mark and I, including us. Okay. Because we're not always we're changing up what we do along the way as well. So I think it's really important that you look at exactly what David said. How many things can you shouldn't be doing unless you're changing the outcome, right? What are the things that you really shouldn't be doing in your business? And also George, because he's top leader, right? So what shouldn't he be doing? He should be doing the same thing and saying, okay, who can we, and then whoever else is in-house, and then delegating so much. The repetitive things and the task things and everything else should all be going to virtual assistants. Okay. So building that out.
Here's the question that somebody asked. Can each of these steps be entered into my CRM, so each of these steps can be entered in as an action plan with a tickler in my CRM using a software like Monday.com?
yes, you can certainly do things that way. And
We use
there's a
Asana.
lot of CRMs, and yeah, Asana is a good task manager, for sure. It works for a lot of people. But yes, these should to highlight, I guess, what a process map is and isn't. I don't recommend that this is your daily task list. Like you print out a million of these, and every time you get a new lead, it's like, all right, X out the box. I would definitely use a task manager, and I'm sure most of you have some version of that. But we should definitely make sure everything matches. Right? To me, the process maps, right? It's like a problem-solving tool, right? How do I identify problems? How do I know whose role it is? If there's a problem, I go to the process map to fix it, and then I make sure the rest of my systems match, right? So to me, this is like the master key. But like I said, I doubt anyone is going to print out a million of these and run through it every single time. Like search through their filing cabinet, pull out the right process map, X, X, X.
Well, and then, okay, so let me ask you this. You figure out who needs to know this process, right? How many people on your team need to know this? And then how do you keep them accountable? Like, do you assign all the tasks? Like, for example, if it's me, all the things that I need this process map, can you assign it to me? And so I know all of these? And is it easy to access?
Sure, great questions. So within Lucidchart, one of the reasons that I like doing it, you can share, and they have free login options, right? I share access to the process maps. My recommendation is everyone in the company should have access to their specific folders and maps, right? So if you're in sales, you should have access to the sales folder. And let me explain before anybody gets worried what I mean by access. And one of the reasons I do like Lucidchart, and again, they don't pay me, so I don't really care if you use them or not, but it's a benefit of the system. You should not share, in my opinion, you should not let anyone edit the process maps, right? Other than like the top level people who actually trust to use the software and all those types of things. You should, one thing I can show you actually really quickly here. If we go right here and I go to,
If you have any other questions, guys, put them in here and Mark will make sure he gets to them.
absolutely. When I go to share something, right, again, it's free, so you can have as many logins as you want, right? I recommend you give everyone comment access because that means they can't change the process, but what they can do is if they have a question, because they're not going to remember the question when you go to review these process maps, most likely, right? You just right click, you add a comment and say something, I really hate this. Here's why. You leave the comment there, it's going to show that little icon, right? So whenever anybody else looks at that process map, they can see the comment's been made. You can tag people. I honestly don't recommend trying to communicate through Lucidchart because you got enough other stuff going on. But when you have your process person go through, it's like, oh, somebody had an idea here. What is that? Let's make sure we have the right meeting around this. So I recommend letting everyone see it. If you do it through Lucid, other softwares have similar setups. Make sure everyone has access to see these. Like a lot of people enjoy if you're in an in-person environment, right? Print them on the walls. The thing that this is, in my opinion, it's a must. Do not laminate the process maps, right? They should not be so nice that you can't drive them. Okay, so if you're going to print them on the walls, there should be a sticky note pad next to them. And when somebody has a problem, slap it on the process map, and all right, there we go. Now it's up for business. And I said somebody yesterday, they had this really nice roll. They were all printed, they were laminated, and they were sitting in the corner doing nothing. All right. So if you want to go that way, that's fine, but put literal sticky notes there, right? They should have like a chalkboard, let people draw on them, let people make them better. That's what they're here for.
Okay, this is really awesome. Guys, this is the time if you have any other questions. And of course, you can reach out to us if you want to get to David and stuff. We'd be happy to do that because he's going to share something with us that we're going to share with you, with all of you. Okay, this stuff that he said. Also, you can go and you can rewatch it on YouTube. We're going to give you the link to go rewatch this if you have any questions or anything else. Are there any other questions right now for David? Was this helpful to you guys and realizing how important this is? Not just creating checklists and processes, but actually, mapping it.
David, did you have a QR code or something that you wanted to?
I'll throw that in the chat if you want.
Forgive me, I'm sorry. What I wanted to say is, listen, you guys know I do a ton with open houses, right? And George and I have talked through this process. I've talked to the sales team, I talked to the ISAs. But as I'm walking through this mapping process, I was hit with 4 other ideas. I'm like, damn, why didn't I think of that sooner? So the act of doing this kind of heightened my awareness of the process and allowed me to mentally write notes down and go, okay, kind of add some steps to it. And then also how to make the agents more aware of certain things. Like, so it was helpful in other ways beyond just that processing piece, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Make more money.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It will help us make more money, bottom line, by mapping it there.
Absolutely, guys. And plus, guys, it makes your business, if you ever are going to look at selling it, you've got to have these. This is what people are looking for. They are looking for the processes and the systems in your business if you're looking to sell your business at any time. Right. So it is so important that you have this stuff and not just a checklist and you've got to build every single part of it out. And Barbara has a good question here. So where do you start with people, David? Like, she's asking what process do you start with? I think that's a great question. And Barbara,
it is a good question.
As a big business as well.
Yeah. So where I start with every every client that I work with. We go through this example. Here's what process mapping is, right? And then we go build an overview, right? Which your whatever term you like, customer journey, cash conversion cycle, SIPOC, business pipeline, right? They're all pretty similar, but chase it from how do I get a lead? Follow that lead's path through your business. Those are your core processes. Because if those don't happen, no money's coming back in. It doesn't matter how good your defense is. If your offense stinks, you're not going to win anything. So start with those core processes first. And I would build, it sounds dumb, I would build an actual overview, right? Here's if you have a multiple exit strategy real estate business, that's the template for it. I would build it out so you can literally check them off, right? All right, marketing, there we go. That one's done. And they should be linked together. So for example, the end of your marketing process, right, is probably going to be lead received. Okay, the beginning of your qualifying the lead process should be lead received, right? There should be no gap in between, nothing that's missed. If you wanted to, you should be able to print these process maps in order, overlap the terminators, and have the entire thing out there, right? Is that really practical? No, but it should work that way so there's nothing missed. Because a lot of times in process maps, the thing that actually kills you isn't the process, it's the missing notification, right? In the process. It's all the dead time because no one knew it was their turn. All right, so we didn't get into all that, but that's another big thing that'll happen.
This is great right here, guys. Don't you think? I mean, really looking at this and how you're going to build out the marketing, qualifying the lead, and if you think about it, and you can think about it even like, where does it start in your business? He's right. Starts with marketing, right? And then the marketing is the lead source. And then what happens next? So think about that entire process in your business and what's next, and then just start building one at a time. Now, I'll tell you guys, when we work and like I said, we've been doing it for a long time, but when we're building out all of our processes, sometimes because we go back or they go back and forth on things, sometimes they can talk about one thing, sometimes they talk about 3, 4, or 5 things in an hour. It just depends on how complicated it is or how messed up it is. Or if everybody just has, a different thought process. So, you can do either a little bit or a lot. But what I do tell you to do is just set a time. And we literally, David, how often do we ever miss a week?
Never.
We're probably your
miss.
best people of not missing, right?
I know you guys aren't going to miss that. I don't have to remind you all the time to schedule. It's great.
Because it is that important to us, guys. So, just think about putting it on your schedule every week to either create a process or whatever it is in that 1 hour a week. That's it. Or fix a process or whatever needs to be done. Just schedule 1 hour a week and you guys will be amazed on what your results will be from doing that.
That's the forms that he just put out. So that
that's the forms. Okay.
Yeah, we threw that form in, a few questions to help us prepare, and we'll get somebody from our team to meet with you and try and help you wherever you're at. So not paid or anything like that. Is there a cost
to that or what?
No, it'll be like a free setup. Figure out where you're at. If you want to go with us, that's great. If not, we want to give you some initial structure just so you know which direction to head in, because that's very frustrating in getting started.
Yeah. And I want you guys to know that there is absolutely we brought him on here only to help you. That's what we really brought him on here for.